This presentation was recorded on Menang Noongar Budja, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land, the Menang people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, to the diversity of First Nations people, and to their ongoing culture and connection to Budja. They were the first in this country to hold information and privacy sacred. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. The content that follows is based on the presenter's experience and understanding, and this video does not constitute legal advice. Organisations that are subject to the Australian privacy principles are encouraged to seek appropriate legal advice to understand their obligations and ensure adherence. Welcome to this video, part 4 of the eSafety for Non-Profit series. In this video, we will be looking at the Notifiable Data Breach Scheme and your obligations and responsibilities once a breach occurs. There are generally two dictionary definitions of the noun breach. One is a gap in a wall, barrier or defence. The other is the breaking of a law, agreement or code. In a sense, a data breach is both. A gap has formed in the protection of your data, and the subsequent loss represents a broken agreement. A data breach can describe different scenarios: unauthorised access to the information you hold, data being lost or misplaced, the disclosure of personal information to someone who isn't meant to know it, the destruction of data without following the correct procedures. Some examples might include a traditional cyber attack, where an attacker exploits a vulnerable computer system in order to access sensitive information without authorization, or it could be as simple as an unencrypted laptop left by an employee on a train. The impact of a data breach, both to your organization and to the individuals whose data has been breached, can be devastating. Your organisation will undoubtedly suffer from financial and reputational damages, lost trust, lost sales, costs for investigation, costs for remediation. Depending on whether you are duly diligent about following privacy regulations, you might face fines, penalties, and court-ordered reparations. Your organisation will likely suffer an interruption to day-to-day operations while you contain and investigate the breach, and while staff are seconded to deal with the issue. You will more than likely face greater regulatory oversight in the future to make sure that the issue doesn't recur. But besides the impact to your organisation, and depending on the nature of the breach, the impact felt by those whose data was breached can be even greater. It could be life-changing, with issues like identity theft ruining credit scores, losing jobs, breaking families and even costing lives. In a 2023 study, up to 16% of victims of identity theft reported having suicidal thoughts. Here's a real-world example of a data breach, and given the high-profile nature of the event, one that most people will be aware of. In late 2022, Optus, who is Australia's second biggest telecommunications provider, revealed that they had been the target of a major cyber attack, with the details of over 9 million customers, names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, being stolen by a malicious third party. The impact on the organisation was huge, with 65,000 customers changing provider in the first 3 months. Fines have been levied, and a class action was joined by 100,000 impacted individuals. The then CEO, Kelly Bayer Rosemarin, was called on to resign during a significant Optus outage in 2023, reportedly in part due to the 2022 breach. The impact on individuals, thankfully, was minimised, as those who claimed responsibility for the hack withdrew their demands and did not release the data. Minimal details on 10,000 customers was apparently released. When a data breach occurs, there are a series of steps mandated within the Privacy Act 1988 that are designed to ensure that those whose data is compromised are notified as quickly as possible, and that the organisation that suffers the breach is not able to sweep it under the carpet, so to speak. These mandates are collected into the Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, and upholding it, as well as the Privacy Act and the privacy principles, are a function of the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, or OAIC. The Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, then, is a set of obligations and responsibilities that must be undertaken by any organisation that suffers a serious data breach, primarily to ensure that the breach is contained and that the affected individuals are notified in a timely fashion. The scheme identifies any eligible data breach as one where there is the likelihood of serious harm, physical, emotional, financial, etc., to one or more individuals that can't be prevented by the agency or organisation. As such, once a breach occurs, the organisation needs to notify the affected individuals as quickly as possible so that they have the opportunity to mitigate any harm to themselves as well as to notify the OAIC. There are 4 steps, obligations or responsibilities that an entity must undertake after they suspect a breach is taking or has taken place. The important part to note is that these steps might be taken one at a time, together, or in any order depending on the nature of the situation: contain, assess, notify, and review. We'll look at each of these. A first step, or concurrent first step, to suspecting a data breach is to quickly do everything you can to prevent it getting worse. This can mean stopping any tasks that are taking place that might be causing the problem, recalling any records that might have been exposed, possible, shutting down or isolating any computers, or revoking physical or electronic access. As this is happening, you can also be gaining details of the breach that will be important in the assessment process, and inversely, the assessment process may identify areas that still need to be contained. An important caveat though: while containing the breach, try to avoid destroying any information or evidence that might be useful in either figuring out the cause of the breach or in addressing the risks. The assessment process typically comes before the notification process and can take a couple of different forms. If you have reasonable grounds to believe that a breach has occurred, the assessment might not be necessary or might be minimal, and you must prioritise notifying affected users and the OAIC. Otherwise, if you're not sure, the assessment process is a vital part of identifying if the hack is an eligible data breach. Either way, the assessment will still be needed to construct the data breach statement that the OAIC will require within 30 calendar days. One of the things that the OAIC will require from you is a data breach statement. This is a report that is sent both to the Commissioner but also to any affected individuals as part of your notification process. The breach statement needs to include a way for the recipients to contact you, a description of the breach, details about what information was involved, and should include practical steps that the individuals are able to take to mitigate or limit harm to themselves from the breach. So, either you already had reasonable grounds to believe you've got a breach on your hands, or an assessment process has given you the final push. Your next and most vital step is to notify anyone whose data has been affected, plus the Commissioner. You have some leeway in how you can notify individuals, with the OAIC encouraging you to take an option that is both practicable and ensures as many of the affected individuals as possible are fully notified. This can mean either individually notifying everyone involved, if you have a way to do so, notifying those who are most at risk, or if the previous 2 methods are impractical, for example if the full list isn't known or contact details are missing or outdated, then publishing the notification in a way likely to be seen by impacted individuals is considered a sufficient notification method. Finally, as with any issue, it is important that once the cycle of contain, assess, notify has been completed, that the organisation look very carefully at the circumstances of the breach, the outcome of the assessment and notification process, and all their own policies and procedures, with an eye to ensuring the issue does not reoccur. In the final video of this series, we will look at some of the steps a non-profit organisation can take to protect themselves from data breaches.